Here's what's coming up on The World Today. Jordan's former Crown Prince Hamza says he will defy government orders to stop communicating with the outside world and remain indoors. India's rising daily cases of COVID-19 are raising more concern as the country imposes more restrictions to curb the spread. Plus, Israeli Prime Minister is back in court as he is accused of illegitimate use of power. Welcome to the program, everyone, and a happy Easter. Thanks for letting us be a part of your day. We began in Jordan as the drama continues in the royal family over a former crown prince accused of trying to destabilize the kingdom. Prince Hamza says he is under house arrest, something the Jordanian authorities are refusing to address. The prince now says he will violate his house arrest and will not stop communicating with the outside world, another accusation he is facing, and that he will not be remaining indoors. Hamza is accused of plotting with foreign entities to destabilize Jordan. He denies the throne's conspiracies, but he has accused Jordan's leaders of corruption and incompetence. Prince Hamza was the first in line to succeed his half-brother, King Abdullah, as Jordan's head of state until 2004, when he was removed as crown prince. King Abdullah designated his son as the heir instead. In another development, Israeli businessman Roy Shaponchnik, who has said that he is a personal friend of Prince Hamza, confirmed he had offered to fly the prince's wife and family to Europe to stay at his house. Here in Nigeria, startup Grict has created a Wi-Fi-enabled cooling box that can keep blood, medicine, and vaccines at the correct temperature while being transported in the tropical heat. Grict plans to transport the vaccines around Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital, using any means necessary, including ferry.
Distributing vaccines across Nigeria's hot and dry terrain is not an easy feat. The country's limited facilities mean that medical samples need to be collected and transported, often through poorly maintained roads, to laboratories, sometimes miles away.
Before we refer patients to the lab, but now when they came here, they make the job easier for us in taking the sample to the lab, and it's easy our service delivery.
So last year, the government hired logistics startup Grisid to help transport temperature-sensitive items. The company now uses cold chain monitoring boxes to move blood and plasma samples and vaccine vials. The cold boxes run on solar-powered batteries that can keep the units working for up to 24 hours. And they're the brainchild of Nigerian engineer turned entrepreneur Ogenetega Iyotim.
If you look at the African terrain, you know that some of the major challenges are one, communication, but secondly, which is more importantly, the lack of access to grid, which is access to power. And so for that, when you look back, you would see that there were challenges around accessing ice packs or ice gels that are required as a precondition when transporting things like vaccines or samples from the last mile to the city. With this now, which you know, this is like a solar-powered, battery-powered device that doesn't require all those. So without the infrastructure, this works.
The company launched its Wi-Fi-linked cooler boxes in 2019, meaning customers can track products and their temperatures in real time using a mobile application. The company charges at least 1,000 naira for delivery services, depending on the weight and distance packages are going. They plan to extend to other African countries, supporting health sectors and beyond.
All eyes are on India at the moment, recording daily COVID-19 cases going over 100,000. That's scary, especially when compared to how the situation is developing in the United States and Brazil. Authorities are making more moves now to help bring the numbers down. Here's more in our global update.
With 103,558 new infections, India has now reported 12.6 million cases, the highest out of the United States and Brazil. The country's daily infections have risen about 12-fold since hitting a multi-month low in early February, when authorities eased most restrictions and people largely stopped wearing masks following social distancing.
Let's not blame the new strain for this. It's our COVID inappropriate behavior which is responsible for this rise. So I think the whole country needs to understand and start practicing it from today. Don't go out of the house unless necessary. Avoid closed people collecting in closed rooms. Maintain social distancing and never step out of your house without a mask.
But the country still has one of the lowest fatality rates in the world. At least 165,101 have died. Elsewhere in Asia, thousands of Pakistanis rushed to get inoculated in the first round of commercial sales of COVID-19 vaccines that began over the weekend. Pakistan is currently offering free vaccines to frontline health workers and people over the age of 50. But the drive has so far been slow. And last month, the country allowed commercial imports by the private sector for the general public. While many other countries in Europe remain under full or partial lockdowns, 2 EU members have relaxed measures from today. Portugal has entered its second phase of rolling back restrictions, with museums, cafe terraces and some schools reopening. The government introduced a lockdown in January after a spike in cases, but allowed primary schools resume in-person teaching in March, with more curves expected to be reversed later this month. However, the government on Sunday postponed a plan to allow travel to neighbouring Spain by land and air due to concerns over case numbers. In Greece, meanwhile, some shops have been allowed to reopen today, despite concerns over high case numbers. Restrictions will still be in place, with shoppers required to pre-book appointments and limit on numbers allowed inside shops. The changes will not apply to areas with higher infection rates, including in the Athens and 3 northern regions. Finally, over in England, everyone will be entitled to take a rapid COVID-19 test twice a week to prevent outbreaks and find those not displaying symptoms, under plans to be announced by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Finally, Venice and its lagoon represent one of Italy's treasures, but when it comes to bringing COVID-19 vaccines to elderly living on the islets, major logistical problems arise. The city is taking creative measures to bring the vaccine to its hard-to-reach residents and have turned a water bus, or vaporetto, into a floating vaccination centre.
Let's check in on the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is back in court facing a corruption trial with more things added to the list of actions that he has performed over the years. The first witness in the trial today, former Walla CEO Ilan Yeshua, says the Prime Minister told him to make negative stories about Netanyahu to disappear, and that he was also ordered by the news website's owner, Shaul Elovich, to post content that attacked Mr. Netanyahu's rivals. Prosecutors said Mr. Netanyahu made regulatory decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars to Mr. Elovich in return for the favorable coverage. Both men have denied any wrongdoing. The charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in connection with 3 cases, including the one involving Mr. Elovich, come as the Israeli president meets parliamentarians to ask whom they support to form the next government following last month's elections. The vote failed to end the long period of political stalemate that has led to 4 elections in 2 years, leaving both Mr. Netanyahu's right-wing bloc and the parties opposed to him short of a majority. The VOA's Linda Gradstein is in transit in Dubai, from where she is following the story. Hi, Linda, and thanks for making time for us today. We do know it's a holiday.
Sure, no problem.
So the accusations about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the actions he took, for example, the one about the negative reports, are they well known in Israel that he has been using power illegitimately?
Well, first of all, again, he is on trial for this, and today was the beginning of the evidence phase of the trial. And this trial, by the way, can last up to 3 years, according to a retired judge. So this is a long haul. These accusations are well known. They've been known now for a couple of years. And, people, I think, just feel like there are other issues that are more important than in Israel. They have really not seemed to make a dent in Netanyahu's popularity. His supporters still really like him. His detractors don't like him. But there hasn't been a sort of a public outcry against this. I mean, there have been protests again. There have been protests. There were protests, small protests at the courtroom today. But I think these accusations are well known. But there's the sense that Israel is facing so many other problems, including corona and threat from Iran and all kinds of other things, that the public just does not seem to care that much.
Well, speaking of the public, Linda, we are just wondering if he is facing these charges of corruption, bribery, and breach of trust, why does he still enjoy the huge support back home?
Well, that's actually a very good question. First of all, it's not a huge support. The country is really deadlocked, as you just said in the opening to this talk that we're having. The president of Israel is meeting with the various political parties, and neither Netanyahu nor his main challenger Yair Lapid seem to be able to put together a majority. The latest report, by the way, is that it looks like the president will ask Netanyahu to try to form a government first. It's not clear if he'll be able to do so. I think, there's part of it is Netanyahu has maintained his innocence the whole time. Today, after the opening of the trial, he said that it was an attempt at a judicial coup against him. So his supporters kind of agree that it's efforts by the left-wing media and the left-wing justice establishment to try to overthrow him. He has been very good at reaching people at their base. He's very popular. He's a very good orator. And I think he's also been very successful in terms of the vaccination rollout. I mean, Israel has the fastest vaccination rollout. Something like 80% of adults over the age of 40 are now all vaccinated. Israel did it before anyone else. So I think there's this sense that he's also been prime minister for 12 years straight and 15 years total. He's Israel's longest serving prime minister. So he still has a lot of support. That said, and there doesn't really seem to be an alternative, but that said, right now we're facing a political deadlock.
All right. Well, Linda, thank you for the clarity on that situation, and do stay safe.
Thank you. Thanks.
Rescuers have been trying to retrieve the last body of a passenger from the wreckage of a deadly train crash last week. As the government says, 5 of the 8 carriages have now been removed. 50 people have been confirmed dead after a packed express train carrying almost 500 passengers and crew slammed into a truck near the eastern city of Walen on Friday, causing it to derail and the front end to be crushed. It was the island's worst rail accident in 7 decades. The truck had slid down a sloping road from a building site onto the tracks just outside a tunnel. Officials suspect the truck's brakes were not properly applied and are investigating the manager of the site. Hualien's fire department said that the remaining body was trapped under a 15-ton train bogie. It did not provide details on the identity of the passenger. 5 people have died and many more still missing after a Bangladesh ferry carrying 50 passengers collided with a cargo vessel and sank on Sunday in the Shidlashakia River south of the capital, Dhaka. The ferry, which departed from Nigerian district about 20 kilometers from Dhaka, was traveling to Mushiganj. The police say rescue operation is ongoing and some of the passengers managed to swim ashore. The boat was packed with people rushing to go to their hometown after the government announced a week-long nationwide lockdown from Monday to tackle a spike in the COVID-19 cases. Still ahead on the program. The pandemic may have gotten people down this Easter. All hope and cheer is not lost in Brazil. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Authorities say at least 100 people have died following flash floods and landslides in Indonesia and East Timor. It happened on Sunday as torrential rain sparked widespread destruction in the Southeast Asian neighbors, with water from overflowing dams submerging thousands of homes.
On Sunday said 55 people had died in the flash floods and landslides in a cluster of islands southeast of Indonesia. Locals said 40 people were missing and that the death toll could rise to 100. Authorities also sounded a warning about the Seroja cyclone, which triggered the floods, could bring yet more rain, waves and winds. By Monday, things got worse. Authorities raced to evacuate thousands of people who have been driven from their homes due to Cyclone Seroja's impact. Several bridges collapsed, trees fell and locked some roads in Indonesia, and at least one ship sank in high waves triggered by the cyclone, complicating search and rescue efforts. About 30,000 people have been impacted by the floods, some already taking shelter in evacuation centers. Things could worsen even further, authorities say, as the cyclone's intensity could strengthen, bringing yet more rain, waves and winds, although it is said to be moving away from Indonesia.
The military in Mozambique is claiming to have regained full control of the coastal town of Palma, more than a week after it was raided by militant Islamists. An army spokesperson says a significant number of militants were killed in the counteroffensive. State radio reported that residents who had fled were starting to return, some to homes that were looted. Dozens of civilians were killed and at least 11,000 displaced after the militants invaded Palma on March 24th. And in Ethiopia, the government says Eritrean forces are withdrawing from the Tigre region. It is difficult to verify this, however, as phone connections have been down for days now.
The Ethiopian Foreign Ministry said Eritrean forces have started withdrawing from the Tigre region in northern Ethiopia, following mounting reports blaming the Eritreans for human rights abuses, including rape, looting and killing of civilians. The United States, Germany, France and other G7 countries this week called for a swift and verifiable withdrawal of the Eritrean soldiers, followed by a political process acceptable to all Ethiopians. For months, Eritrea and Ethiopia denied the presence of Eritrean troops, despite dozens of eyewitness accounts. Just last month, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed acknowledged their presence, while Eritrea has still not said its soldiers are there. Ethiopia sent its troops to Tigre in November to fight against the TPLF, which had attacked army bases in the region. In late November, the TPLF withdrew and the Ethiopian government declared victory. Electricity and phone connections to Tigre have been down for the past 4 days, making it difficult to verify any Eritrean withdrawal. Thousands of people have been killed in the conflict. Hundreds of thousands have been forced from their homes, and there are shortages of food, water, and medicine in the region.
This is Channels Television's breaking news.
Breaking news coming from Kaduna. 5 of the 39 kidnapped students of the Federal College of Forestry Mechanization in Kaduna have been found. The students are currently undergoing medical checkups at a military facility. The Kaduna state government says it will provide updates on further operational feedback on efforts to rescue others. 34 students are still in captivity. And finally on the program, Brazil has one of the highest COVID-19 cases and death tolls around the world. And this has gotten the people down as the government fails to take responsibility for the rise. But amid the pandemic, one project in Rio de Janeiro is helping to put smiles on faces this Easter with a special celebration of literature.
Complexo Alemão is one of Rio de Janeiro's largest and most dangerous favelas, the Portuguese word for slum. But this weekend, drug gangs temporarily ceded control of the territory for a special event. Neighbors gather as teachers at the Little Star daycare facility hand out chocolate candy and books to children who have not been able to attend school for months. Inside, students gather for a rare book club celebration. While happy to receive sweets, they were mostly hungry for words, devouring these freely available works by local authors with favela themes, characters and stories. Founder of the book club, Carolina Marino, says she decided to create a book club during the pandemic because not many children have internet, so they cannot do remote learning, and the results have been wonderful because they love to read. Arriving by motorcycle taxi, the event's main attraction is superstar author Otávio Jr., the first black favela writer to win the coveted Jabuti Child Literature Prize, the most prestigious in Brazil. Getting down to business, Junior conducts a contest to match authors with their books. All were well known to these children who sat and thrilled as the author offered personal stories and encouraging words. Getting to know more details behind the story, the children learned from the author that while life in the slum is hard, there is no limit to the imagination. The book project has been an important way to promote literacy and cultural awareness for these children during the pandemic. Isolation has been an added hardship for slum life, but having access to the books in their club has clearly had an impact on these young minds.
And before we do close the program today, we want to remind you of our breaking news that 5 of the 39 students of the Federal College of Forestry Mechanization in Kaduna have been found. The students are currently undergoing medical checkups at a military facility. The Kaduna state government says it will provide updates on further operational feedback on efforts to rescue the others. 34 students are still in captivity. And I do want to repeat that 5 of the 39 kidnapped students have been found. We will bring you details as soon as they come into us. That is all for the program today. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.